In a decision with sweeping consequences, the Supreme Court has fundamentally altered the landscape of American trade policy, sending shockwaves through both political and economic circles across the nation. The court has struck down the Trump-era tariffs, effectively dismantling a core piece of the America First trade agenda that had defined U.S. economic policy for years and sparked intense debate at home and abroad. These tariffs, which were imposed on billions of dollars worth of imports such as steel and aluminum, were originally justified by the administration as necessary national security measures, aiming to protect American industries and jobs from foreign competition. However, the move quickly triggered global retaliation, with trading partners imposing their own tariffs on American goods, and led to higher prices for everyday products at home, affecting both businesses and consumers. The legal battle that followed centered on a critical question. Did the president overstep his authority by invoking a Cold War-era law for economic reasons rather than genuine security threats? This challenge was brought forward by a broad coalition of American businesses, manufacturers, and trade groups who argued that the tariffs hurt their bottom lines and undermined fair competition. The court's ruling now stands as a major check on presidential power in the realm of trade, reaffirming the constitutional principle that Congress, not the executive branch, holds the ultimate authority to regulate foreign commerce and set the rules for international trade. This landmark decision forces a national reckoning over the merits of protectionism versus free trade, exposing deep divisions not only among lawmakers and the public, but also among the justices themselves regarding the proper scope of presidential authority in economic matters. The majority opinion emphasized that any regulation of foreign commerce must be clearly tied to limits defined by Congress, ensuring that no single branch of government can unilaterally reshape the nation's trade relationships without legislative oversight. In contrast, the dissenting justices argued for broader executive power, warning that restricting the president's flexibility could hamper the nation's ability to respond swiftly to global economic threats and shifting international dynamics. While the debate over trade policy and executive authority is far from settled, this historic ruling sets a new course for America's role in the global economy, signaling a renewed emphasis on checks and balances and a more active role for Congress in shaping the future of U.S. trade. The Supreme Court's decision in this landmark case centered on the interpretation of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, a law that has rarely been tested at this level. Section 232 grants the president the authority to impose tariffs or other trade restrictions if it is determined that certain imports pose a threat to national security. This provision, originally intended as a safeguard for extraordinary circumstances, suddenly found itself at the heart of a national debate. The law's language is broad, giving the president significant discretion to act when national security is at stake, but it leaves open the question of what truly constitutes a threat. The Trump administration invoked Section 232 to justify sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum, arguing that these imports undermined America's industrial base, and by extension, its security. However, thousands of U.S. companies pushed back, claiming the law was being misused, transformed from a shield for rare emergencies into a blunt instrument for economic protectionism that hurt American businesses. These businesses presented evidence that the tariffs disrupted critical supply chains, increased production costs, and led to job losses, all without delivering clear benefits to national defense. The government, on the other hand, argued that a robust domestic manufacturing sector is vital for national security and that the president must have wide latitude to act quickly in a changing world. This legal battle forced the Supreme Court to weigh the intent of a 60-year-old statute against the complex realities of today's global economy and the expanding reach of presidential power. The core issue remains: where does legitimate national security concern end, and where does economic protectionism begin? The line is often blurred, making the court's decision even more consequential. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's ruling will not only resolve this case, but also set a precedent that will shape the future of American trade policy and presidential authority for years to come. The Supreme Court's majority set a stricter standard for using Section 232, requiring a clear link between an import and a real security threat. The justices ruled that economic competition alone isn't enough to justify sweeping tariffs. Congress never meant to hand the president a blank check. This decision reaffirms the separation of powers, ensuring major economic decisions aren't made by the executive alone. Dissenting justices argued that economic strength is vital to national security and that the president needs flexibility to counter global rivals. The ruling sets a precedent: future presidents must build a strong, evidence-based case before invoking national security for tariffs. The court draws a firm line: Congress controls commerce, and the executive's power has limits. This is a victory for those wary of unchecked presidential authority in trade. The end of the tariffs is expected to bring immediate relief to consumers and businesses. For years, these import taxes quietly raised prices on everything from cars to canned foods. With tariffs gone, import costs drop, and economists predict lower prices across a wide range of goods. This could help cool inflation, easing the financial strain on American families and businesses. Companies will see lower costs and improved profit margins, freeing up capital for hiring, innovation, and growth. The newfound stability will encourage long-term investment and planning. However, the transition won't be seamless. Markets and supply chains will need to adjust quickly. In the long run, the ruling promises lower costs and greater efficiency, but the immediate aftermath will be a period of recalibration. The Supreme Court's ruling creates clear winners and losers across American industry. Sectors that rely on imported materials, like automotive and construction, will see major cost reductions and new opportunities for growth. Manufacturers of everything from appliances to beer cans will benefit from lower input costs, boosting innovation and hiring. For these businesses, the ruling ends years of financial strain. But domestic steel and aluminum producers, once shielded by tariffs, now face tough global competition, likely leading to lower prices and potential job losses. This highlights the classic trade-off: tariffs protect some industries, but raise costs for many others. The court's decision prioritizes broad economic benefits over targeted protection. Policymakers now face the challenge of supporting communities hit hardest by renewed competition. The Supreme Court's decision marks a pivotal moment, shifting significant trade power back to Congress and the realm of diplomacy. This change makes it much more difficult for presidents to impose tariffs or other trade barriers on their own, without oversight or approval. Instead of unilateral executive action, the process now requires a return to the checks and balances envisioned by the Constitution, ensuring that major trade decisions are debated and decided collectively. Future administrations will need to seek explicit congressional approval before taking major trade actions, and will increasingly rely on negotiations, compromise, and established international dispute mechanisms. This means that trade policy will be shaped by a broader range of voices and interests, reflecting the will of the people through their elected representatives. The ruling signals a return to alliance-driven trade strategies, encouraging the U.S. to work closely with global partners rather than acting alone. By strengthening alliances and honoring international agreements, the U.S. can build more resilient and mutually beneficial trade relationships. This shift restores a sense of stability and predictability for businesses, both large and small, reducing the risk of sudden, disruptive policy changes that can impact investments, jobs, and supply chains. Trade enforcement won't disappear under this new system. Instead, it will focus on targeted, legally sound tools, such as anti-dumping investigations and fair trade practices, ensuring that enforcement is both effective and justified. The new approach is more methodical and evidence-based, relying on careful analysis and transparent decision-making. This marks a clear move away from the unpredictability and volatility that characterized recent years. As a result, companies can now plan for the future with greater confidence, knowing that the rules of trade won't change overnight and that there is a clear, stable process in place. Ultimately, the decision marks a significant departure from the disruptive trade wars of the past, ushering in a new era of stability, cooperation, and thoughtful policymaking in U.S. trade relations. America's trading partners have welcomed the Supreme Court's decision, seeing it as a return to predictable, rules-based trade. The ruling paves the way for the removal of retaliatory tariffs, reopening key export markets for American businesses. It also strengthens global institutions like the World Trade Organization, encouraging countries to resolve disputes through negotiation, not trade wars. For China, the decision removes a major point of friction, but strategic competition with the US will continue. The ruling shifts the dynamic from confrontation to structured competition and cooperation. Globally, the move is seen as the US rejoining a cooperative, stable economic order. The world breathes a sigh of relief as trade relations normalize. For the Biden administration, the ruling is both an opportunity and a challenge. It provides legal cover to remove tariffs and repair alliances, but risks backlash from labor unions and industrial states. The White House must highlight the broader economic benefits, lower prices, and relief for manufacturers while preparing support for affected workers. Policy will shift toward building international coalitions and using targeted tools against unfair trade practices, especially from China. The administration will rely more on the World Trade Organization and multilateral solutions. The ruling forces a clear, comprehensive vision for U.S. trade, balancing enforcement, domestic support, and global cooperation. The coming months will test the administration's ability to craft a sustainable, effective trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision is a landmark reassertion of the separation of powers in U.S. government. By narrowing the definition of national security, the court returns significant trade authority to Congress and sets strict limits on unilateral executive action. Future presidents will face higher legal hurdles and must work more closely with Congress on trade. The ruling encourages lawmakers to write clearer laws, preventing broad interpretations that expand presidential power. This case recalibrates the balance of power in trade policy, lowers costs, and resets global relations. It reaffirms that regulating commerce is a shared responsibility, grounded in law and constitutional checks. The challenge ahead, forging a trade policy that's tough, fair, and not concentrated in one person's hands.